I work in a warehouse, and an older coworker kept mocking me for taking my breaks. I responded with a couple of sarcastic comebacks, and ever since, he stopped talking to me. Now I can enjoy my lunches in peace. The first thing people always imagine when they hear warehouse job is noise. Big machines, forklifts beeping as they reverse, the echo of steel doors rolling up and down, the clatter of pallets being shifted. And they're right. But what they don't always picture is the rhythm of it all the way. The noise becomes background music after a while, like an offbeat song you eventually learn to hum along with. I'm 27, been at the warehouse a few years now. It's not glamorous work, but it pays steady, and steady counts for a lot when you're trying to make rent and keep the fridge from looking too empty. I clock in every morning at 6 sharp, throw on the neon vest, and step into that familiar echo chamber of cardboard, dust, and sweat. Most of us get along fine. We know the grind. We know the hours. Some of the older guys like to grumble. Some of the younger ones sneak their earbuds under the vest. But for the most part, we all just do the job. Until you run into someone like Gary. Gary's thinning hair, big gut, and a face that always looks like he just smelled something bad. The thing is, Gary isn't management. He's not a supervisor, not even a shift lead. He's just a regular employee like the rest of us. But he carries himself like he owns the place, like we should be grateful he even acknowledges us. From the first day I met him, I noticed it. The way he barked at new hires, correcting them on things he had no authority over. The way he strutted past the actual supervisors, nodding like they secretly reported to him. It was annoying, but most people shrugged it off. You learn to let people like that burn themselves out. For me, the moment came last week. It was during my scheduled lunch break. Keyword, scheduled. The warehouse follows labor law to the letter half. An hour unpaid break in the middle of the shift, to 10-minute paid breaks spaced out before and after. Everyone gets them, everyone takes them. You need those minutes to breathe, to stop your legs from turning into concrete. So I was sitting there at the little break table in the corner, unwrapping my sandwich, sipping on an energy drink, when Gary strutted by, gave me this sneer, like he was looking down from some throne only he could see. Must be nice, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Being so lazy, for a second I thought he was joking, but no, his lip curled, just enough to show he meant it. Now, I'm not usually the type to start anything. I've got bills to pay and no interest in drama. But something about the way he said it lit a spark in me. So I smiled, calm, collected, and I said, yeah, it's almost like following labor laws. The look on his face was priceless. His eyes flickered, his mouth opened, like he wanted to retort, but nothing came out. He muttered something under his breath and walked off, the sound of his boots stomping a little harder than before. I thought that would be the end of it. Just one smart remark, a little jab to remind him I wasn't the type to be pushed around. But Gary wasn't done. Oh no, the next day, same time, same break table. I was halfway through my burrito when he appeared again, like some self-appointed hall monitor of productivity. He leaned against the vending machine, arms crossed, eyes locked on me, like I was committing a crime. Taking it easy again. He sneered. Guess some of us carry the load while others just. I didn't let him finish. I looked up, met his eyes, and said, don't worry, I'll teach you how brakes work. After I teach you how deodorant works. The silence that followed was beautiful. You could practically hear the air rush out of him. His face went red, his jaw clenched. But he didn't say a word. He turned and walked away. And since then he hasn't spoken to me. And you know what? My lunch has never tasted better. That's the short version. But the longer story, the real story stretches further than a single smart remark. It's about the warehouse, the people who work there, the way small conflicts can turn into legends told over the sound of forklifts and conveyor belts. It's about the strange satisfaction of finally standing up to someone who's been throwing his weight around for too long. And that story starts with something simple. Me, a lunch break, and a man who thought he was everyone's boss. The morning after the deodorant line, the warehouse felt lighter. Maybe it was just me. Maybe it was the crisp bite of the air coming in through the loading dock, or the sun knifing through the high windows and cutting the dust into glitter. Or maybe it was the fact that for the first time in months, I didn't feel a pair of imaginary eyes judging me every time I checked the clock for my break. Gary didn't say a word to me. Not a grunt, not a hey, not even one of his trademark disapproving huffs. He passed my station twice before 10, and each time he turned his head like he'd spotted a hazard sign he didn't agree with. The silence wasn't peace. Exactly, it was truce through injury. A man licking his pride where no one could see. Morning, Professor, Maya said as she cruised by on the forklift, the forks hovering just above the floor. Around here, Professor, was what you called anyone who got the last word in a dumb argument. Her neon vest was patched with tape and her hair was coiled in a bun that could survive a hurricane. Heard you taught a hygiene seminar yesterday. I kept my eyes on the scanner, a stack of cartons waiting to get married to barcodes. Rumors travel faster than forklifts in here. Only when the rumor smells good, she said, grinning as she reversed, the backup beeper chirping a cheerful lie. By first break, half the crew knew. Not the exact words I hadn't repeated them, but the gist. Gary had done his hall monitor, act at the wrong time with the wrong audience, and I'd put a little fence around my 30 minutes with a joke. The story spread in pieces. A lifted eyebrow, a smirk traded over a pallet jack, a murmured, ask him what brand he recommends. I told myself it was nothing. A moment, a line that turned a sneer on its heel. But in places like this, moments metastasize. They grow legs, pick up cargo, get delivered from one end of the building to the other. Gary made himself a ghost around me, but he didn't vanish. He redirected. There was a new kid that week 16 shades of nervous, hands that shook when he loaded tape onto the dispenser. Name was Jelani. First warehouse job. He'd brought a notebook on his first day, like he was going to jot down some secret formula for lifting with your legs. Too slow, Gary told him by the receiving bay, standing with his thumbs hooked into the belt loops of his sagging jeans. You want to keep up in here. You move like you've already fallen behind. Jelani nodded, like the words were instructions on how to breathe. Yes, sir. Don't call me sir, Gary said, enjoying the hook before he yanked it. I work for a living. You and the rest of us, Luis muttered near me, loading shrink wrap onto a spool. Luis had been here a decade, had 3 kids, and owned a laugh that could knock a hat off at 20 paces. He never wasted it on Gary. I watched Jelani try to carry too much at once, 2 awkward cartons, and a sleeve of bubble wrap looped around his wrist. Gary stood inches away, offering no help, narrating every misstep like a sports commentator who hated both teams. When one carton slipped, Jelani pinballed off a post and barely saved it with his knee. Hey, I called over. One at a time. Champ, we're not getting paid per hero moment. Gary looked at me as if my voice had tripped the fire alarm. He needs to learn speed. He needs to learn form, I said, stepping past them to demonstrate. Speed comes after you're not bleeding on the product. A couple of people snickered. Gary didn't. His eyes flicked to the bulletin board that held the laminated brake compliance and safety poster. The one the state made the company hang where everybody could see it. Big block letters. Required brakes. Required meal periods. The law in a font you couldn't pretend was a suggestion. I could tell he hated that poster. The way you hate a rule, you've built your personality around ignoring. Stick to your area, he said flatly. Stick to your deodor. Luis coughed into his sleeve, and the sentence went back where it came from. I let the moment pass. There's a difference between winning a point and trying to sweep the set. I'd made my point. Now the job was to not make myself a villain in the sequel. I trained Jelani through the first half of the day when I had space. Little stuff. Don't yank the tape backward. You'll nick the roller, and it'll chew your fingers next time. Keep the knife folded unless it's in your hand. You don't want to kneel into an open blade later. There are 2 kinds of pain in a warehouse. The one that teaches you quickly, and the one that sits in your back until you can't stand up straight at 30. Thanks, Jelani said, when the lunch whistle screamed like a kettle. He held up his notebook, which already had a constellation of ink freckles. Nobody else said, everybody else will. I told him, maybe not Gary, but the rest of us don't want you crushed by the world's most boring cause of death. I passed the break table with a little anticipatory dread, half expecting Gary to be leaning there with a stopwatch and a smirk. It wasn't. He was on the far side of the room, back to us, arms crossed. I sat, unwrapped my sandwich, and for the second day in a row, the food tasted better than it had any right to. You really poked the bear, huh? Tasha said, sliding into the seat across from me. Tasha ran, shipping when Rick, our actual supervisor, was off the floor. She had a stare that could align a pallet and a voice that could cut cardboard. Careful, he doesn't start filing his claws on the newbies. Already tried, I said, went full drill sergeant on Jelani. She sighed. Gary's been here long enough to know better. Long enough to know how the game is played. Some folks hate the rules, so they invent their own. Rules like I'm the boss because I'm loud. Rules like if I keep everyone slightly afraid of me, nobody will notice I'm bored and a little scared of being replaceable. Tasha opened a yogurt, considered it, closed it again. He has his uses. He can lift, he knows the aisles. Better than the software, but he likes to borrow authority he doesn't have. Why does he get away with it? Tasha shrugged. Because nobody wants to spend their afternoon refereeing a guy who doesn't technically break the rules. Petty is slippery. You can't post a policy that says don't be a jerk, even if you should. We ate. We listened to the TV show, a daytime courtroom where everyone yelled louder than our forklifts. We watched a minute hand and the door. This is what 30 minutes buys you in a warehouse. Food, a seat, and the temporary illusion that your body isn't a machine. You're renting to someone else. On my way back to my station, I passed a whiteboard by the receiving bay where we wrote down the dock assignments and any notes about damaged pallets. Someone had scrawled in the corner, in blocky, self-important letters. Breaks are privilege, not a right. A little frowny face for good measure. I grabbed the dry erase marker without breaking stride and drew an arrow from the sentence to the labor poster across the way. Under the arrow, I wrote, says no one who's read the law. A couple of people snorted. I kept walking. That afternoon, I found my scanner missing. Not gone, just misplaced with malice. Each scanner is assigned, checked out to your badge, and we keep them tethered when we can because they're weirdly valuable for something that looks like a TV remote mated with a brick. I found mine 2 aisles over, face down behind a stack of dish soap, like someone had tried to accidentally knock it off and couldn't make it fall far enough. Lose something? Gary asked from the end of the aisle, not looking at me, his tone neutral in a way that dared me to accuse him. Found something, I said, hoisting the scanner and checking it for cracks. None. Weird how technology wanders around here. Maybe if you spent more time working and less time lecturing, your equipment would stay where it belongs. I glanced at the scanner screen. My pick rate and accuracy stared back at me in hospital green numbers. Both better than yesterday. Both better than his if he'd bothered to check. Looks like it knows where it belongs. He finally gave me his eyes. There was something hot in them. Something older than me. Not hatred. Resentment. The kind you ferment out of years. If you were my kid, he said softly, I'd tell you that mouth will buy you trouble you can't afford. If you were my dad, I said just as softly, I'd tell you brakes keep you from dropping a pallet on your foot at 3 in the afternoon. We stood there a beat too long. Luis clanked past with a pallet jack like a cymbal crash breaking. Up, bad music. I let him be the noise that ended the moment. Friday was safety meeting day. Every week, 10 minutes in the morning, and once a month, a big one. This Friday was the big one. Rick rolled out the TV Carter relic with a flat screen zip tied to it like a hostage, and hit play on the company's newest safety and respect in the workplace video. We watched grainy reenactments of men in hard hats lifting things incorrectly, and then, correctly, of someone stepping over a pallet and twisting an ankle in slow motion. Then there was a segment on brakes, a cheery narrator explaining state law in terms that wouldn't scare a toddler, and a final piece about respectful communication. When the lights came up, Rick did his usual spiel. Brakes are not optional. If you skip them, your body will invoice you later, and I don't have budget for your chiropractic plan. Take your 2 10s and your lunch. If someone gives you trouble about it, send them to me or to HR. Also, cut the sarcasm. We're all adults. Don't talk to each other like you're paying rent in each other's heads. He didn't look at me when he said it. He also didn't look at Gary. He did what good supervisors do. He looked at all of us and none of us and hoped the right people got the message. The Monday after Friday's collapse began with a silence that felt louder than any forklift alarm. The warehouse is rarely quiet. There's always the chorus of pallet jacks squeaking, tape dispensers shrieking, boxers thumping, but that morning, the noise felt hushed, cautious, like everyone was afraid to break the air. Gary walked in at his usual time, boots heavy on the concrete, neon vest crooked on his shoulders. He didn't look at anyone. Didn't mutter, didn't sneer, didn't bark orders, just clocked in, grabbed a pallet jack, and started moving like a man carrying weights no one else could see. His silence was almost worse than his voice. I tried to bury myself in the rhythm scan, lift, stack, repeat. The beeps and clacks of work usually soothe me, but that day, the rhythm felt broken, like a song stuck on one sour note. By 9, the whispers had started. HR's calling him in today. Rick got a whole binder on him. I heard they might reassign him to nights. Warehouse rumors move faster than forklifts. They zigzag through aisles. Hitch rides on gossip. Land in your ear before you even see the person spreading them. By first break, everyone knew the same thing. Gary was under the microscope, and nobody knew if he'd walk out of the building at the end of his shift. I sat at the break table with my sandwich. Jelani across from me. Notebook already out. Scribbled down notes between bites, muttering things like don't stack heavier than chest level and always bend your knees. I smiled. The kid reminded me of myself when I first started, desperate to learn every rule, every shortcut, except I hadn't had anyone to guide me. You don't have to write down everything. I told him I do, he said earnestly. Otherwise, I forget. He paused, glancing around before lowering his voice. Do you think Gary's really in trouble? I shrugged. If he is, it's not because of me. It's because he built himself a tower of mistakes and it finally tipped. Jelani nodded, though his eyes stayed wide. For him, Gary wasn't just some obnoxious coworker, he was a looming figure. The kind of presence that makes a new hire wonder if they'll survive in a place like this. That's when the break room door swung open. Gary stepped in. The room dipped in volume instantly, conversations stuttering like radios losing signal. He scanned the tables, eyes passing over me without stopping. For a moment, I thought he might try to reclaim ground with one of his trademark sneers. Instead, he grabbed a coffee from the machine, leaned against the counter, and stared at the floor tiles as if they'd insulted him. He didn't say a word. When the bell rang to end break, people practically leaped from their seats. No one wanted to be caught in Gary's orbit for too long. Around 11, Rick called me into his glass box. He didn't waste time. HR's got a file, he said, tapping the desk where a stack of papers sat. Big one. Complaints about Gary going back months. Some about his tone, some about safety. Friday just poured gas on the pile. I nodded slowly. So what happens? Rick leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Procedure. They'll call him and hear his side. Review footage. Decide if he stays, moves, shifts, or walks. For good. I hesitated. You think he'll get fired? Rick's sigh was long and tired. Depends. HR doesn't like firing unless it's clean, but sometimes the pattern is enough. I left the office with a weight in my chest. I hadn't come here to end a man's career. But maybe it wasn't me who had ended anything. Maybe it was Gary. Years ago, when he decided authority was something you could fake with volume and sneers. The real moment came after lunch. HR walked onto the floor with a manager I didn't recognize, both of them in crisp shirts that looked alien against the dust and grime of our world. They found Gary near the loading dock, called his name, and motioned him forward. Everyone froze. Even the forklifts seemed to pause mid-beat. Gary straightened slowly, like a man squaring himself before a storm. He didn't look around, didn't meet my eyes, just followed them toward the front office, his boots heavy on the floor. The sound echoed long after he turned the corner, and then he was gone. The shift carried on, but something was different. People laughed louder, talked freer. Maya drove past me on the forklift, grinning ear to ear. Feels like someone opened a window in here, she said. Luis clapped me on the shoulder. Congrats, Professor. You passed the class. I chuckled, shaking my head. Didn't do it alone. Doesn't matter, he said. Sometimes one person takes the first step, and the rest of us remember, we have legs too. When the day ended, I walked out into the parking lot, the evening sky painted in gold and gray. Jelani caught up to me, notebook tucked under his arm. Thanks, he said suddenly. For what? For standing up for me. For not letting him pin it on me. I'll remember that. His words sat heavy in my chest, heavier than any box I'd lifted all week. It reminded me that what had started as a simple clapback over lunch had become something bigger, a shift in the way people saw themselves here, a reminder that dignity doesn't belong to the loudest voice in the room, it belongs to all of us, if we're willing to claim it. The next morning, I half expected Gary to reappear, swagger restored, punishment a slap on the wrist, but his station was empty. His locker, too. Word floated in, suspended, maybe permanent. Nobody knew. For sure, HR doesn't tell the crew much. What I did know was this. The warehouse felt lighter. The break room chatter was brighter. The whiteboard where Gary once wrote, "Breaks are a privilege," now carried a doodle of a smiling sandwich with the caption, "Breaks are delicious." Someone probably Maya taped a fresh copy of the labor laws under the clock. Bold and clear, a silent declaration that we knew our rights, and we weren't afraid to claim them. That Friday, during the safety meeting, Rick cleared his throat. Breaks, he said, are not a privilege. They're law, they're health. They're how we keep from burning out. Anyone who says otherwise is wrong. Full stop. Nobody argued. Nobody needed to. Warehouse had already chosen its side. Walking out to my car that evening, I thought about Gary, not with anger, but with something closer to pity. I wondered if he'd ever understand that authority isn't built on sneers and insults. It's built on respect, on how you make people feel when they're around you. I thought, too, about Jelani, about how he no longer flinched when a pallet wobbled, how he asked questions with steady eyes, now, how he carried himself like someone who belonged. And I realized something. Sometimes, the biggest culture shift doesn't come from HR or policies or supervisors. It comes from a single moment, a single joke about deodorant, tossed across a break table, that reminds everyone that dignity is ours to keep. Now, when I sit down for lunch, the food tastes better than ever. Not because it's different, but because I know nobody can take it from me. My lunch has never tasted better. When the meeting broke, Gary Lingard. I did too. We ended up in the same corridor by accident, or fate, or the kind of gravity that pulls two stubborn planets together. You run to teacher? He asked, voice low. Video's been on the schedule since last month, I said. Besides, if I ran to teacher, they'd use better actors. The ghost of a smile tried to punch through his face and didn't make it. He slipped his hands into his pockets, rocked on his heels, studied the scuffed linoleum like it had secrets. You think you're right because you're funny, he said. I think I'm right because I'm right, I said, and then softened. Hidden because we all signed the same handbook. He chuckled, short and humorless. Handbook says a lot of things that don't happen in the real world, like respect, like respect. He looked up at me. For the first time, I saw how tired his eyes were. Not the usual fake tired of a guy who wants credit for showing up before sunrise, but the deep tired of someone who's been awake for years. You think this place cares if your back quits at 48? You think they'll frame your hard hat and hang it on a wall? No, I said. I think they'll hire the next person who can lift 50 pounds without making a sound. He nodded. So we make our own respect. Not by stealing lunch from each other, I said. Not by pretending to be the boss because the boss is busy. Respect isn't a pyramid you get to sit on because you've been here longer. It's a door you hold open so the next person doesn't walk into it. His jaw clicked. You'll learn, maybe, I said, but not from you. He walked away with the slow roll of a man who'd decided the conversation hadn't gone his way but would, someday. I watched him turn the corner. I didn't feel victorious. I felt like someone who'd just realized the floor was a little more uneven than he'd thought. That weekend, rumors drifted through the group chat like dust motes in light. Someone said Gary had complained to Rick that I was undermining him. Someone else said he'd told HR he felt harassed, which amused me more than it should have. Another person swore they'd seen him take a photo of the whiteboard after my arrow and comment moment. Proof that I was fomenting a rebellion. With dry erase markers, Monday morning, there was a yellow slip tucked into the vent of my locker. For a second, my stomach dropped. The color was too close to the write-up forms we'd all seen at one point or another. But when I pulled it free, it was just a post. See me, Rick. Neutral handwriting. Could have been about inventory. Could have been about war. Rick's office was a glass box overlooking the floor. He waved me in without pausing his typing. Close the door. I did. The noise outside dulled to a distant ocean. Rick leaned back, popped his knuckles, and fixed me with a look that wasn't angry. Just tired, like a referee at minute 80. In a game that started sloppy and stayed that way, I got an email from HR, he said. Then I got two more. Then one from safety, about a growing culture of sarcasm. He let that hang, then sighed. About a whiteboard. Note, about a remark regarding personal hygiene. I kept my face still. Did they also get an email about a guy repeatedly interfering with another employee's lawful breaks? They got many emails. He said dryly. Most of them didn't include dates, times, or names. Yours did, which I appreciate. I blinked. Mine. He nodded at his screen. You sent HR the schedule references and the labor code section number on Friday. You CC'd me, which was very procedural of you. I like sleeping at night. I like my crew not sniping at each other. He folded his arms. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to write up nobody. Today, we're going to put a note in the safety meeting minutes about breaks and respectful communication. We're going to ask everyone to bring concerns to me instead of playing whiteboard philosopher. And we are going to keep our jokes in our heads, unless they're about pallets doing the cha-cha. I can do that, I said. Can Gary? Don't manage Gary, I said, and then added, but I can manage me. Rick stared at me a long second, then nodded. Good answer. One more thing. He slid a printed page across the desk. It was a safety report. The photo at the top showed a pallet stacked too high. Shrink wrap loose like a party streamer. A top box slouched like it was drunk. This almost tipped in aisle D. Nobody hurt. Could have been. Who's? I asked, even though my gut knew. Can't say for sure, he said, but the floor camera caught someone with a familiar gait, rushing through that aisle 10 minutes. Before it did the leaning tower of pizza. We can take 2 lessons from that. Don't stack like a toddler. And don't rush. I nodded. Copy. He gave me a look that said I was dismissed, then added, you're a good worker. Keep being a good worker. Don't get hooked. Hooks make you bleed. I stepped back onto the floor feeling 10 pounds heavier and 2 feet taller, which is a fun combination. Gary was on the far end again, guiding a pallet jack with more speed than grace. He didn't look at me. I didn't look at him. Truce. Take 2. By mid-morning, I was in a groove that felt like flying low. Scan, lift, place, tape. The warehouse was loud, but my head was quiet. When you get it right, the work becomes a loop. You can breathe inside. I almost forgot about everything until I turned the corner into aisle C and saw Jelani staring down at the floor like it had betrayed him. What's up? I asked. He pointed. A utility knife lay open on the concrete, blade glinting, teeth out, no sheath, no tape, just waiting for a careless knee. 2 inches to the left was a smear of blood, small but bright. Found it like that, he said, voice shaky. I didn't, I'm careful. I picked up the knife, folded it, pocketed it, not yours. He shook his head. No, I believed him. Not because his eyes were scared, but because there are a dozen micro habits that tell you who someone is on a floor like this, and none of Jelani's said leaves, blades, where bones bend. Tell Rick, I said. Tell safety. Will I get someone in trouble? Maybe, I said. Maybe you'll keep someone from stepping on it in 2 hours. We walked it up to the front together. On the way, Gary appeared from an aisle, like he'd been dropped in by a script. He looked at the knife in my hand, then at Jelani, then at me, and for a second, just a second, something like embarrassment flickered across his face. Careful, he said, tone flat. That's a write-up. For whoever left it, yeah, I said. He chewed that a moment, then moved on. No lecture, no sneer, just a man rearranging his next bad idea somewhere behind his eyes. Back at my station, Maya rolled by and tapped the steering wheel. You okay? Define okay. Not on fire, she said, not quitting. Then yeah, I said, I'm okay. She nodded at the ceiling. You know where the power is in a place like this, right? It's not in the badge color or whose name is on the schedule. It's in who decides to make everyone else's day harder or easier. Start stacking your power in the second category, and watch what happens. What happens? People start standing next to you when the wind kicks up. She smiled, and the wind always kicks up. By the end of the shift, small things had shifted. The whiteboard's fake wisdom had been wiped clean. A photocopy of the break policy had been taped under the clock like a little constitution. Someone Tasha probably had labeled the extra deodorant in the locker room community with a winking face. It was funny, but it was also a way of saying, we take care of the problem and the person at the same time. I clocked out with my legs humming that familiar ache and my mind steady. In the parking lot, the evening air smelled like rain and hot brakes. I was halfway to my car when I heard boots on gravel behind me. I didn't turn until I had to. Gary stopped a few feet away. Hands in his jacket pockets, chin tilted like he was trying to see if I'd flinch. We stood in a stretch of quiet that held nothing except the cooling tick of engines. You think I hate you, he said. It wasn't a question. I think you hate being reminded there are rules, I said, and that none of us wrote them. He looked past me toward the road, where a bus sighed to a stop and swallowed a handful of people we'd see again in 12 hours. You know what happens if I stop moving? He asked. If I sit down, if I take every break, I feel it. Everything I've been out running. The tired, the other stuff. Then don't run from it, I said, surprising myself by meaning it. Sit with it. Take the break. Stand up again. We're not paid to pretend we're machines. He snorted. You sound like a poster. I sound like a guy who wants to still be able to pick up his kid one day. Something complicated crossed his face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, You don't have kids. I'd like the option, I said. He nodded once, slow, like a concession in a game he hadn't known he was playing. See you tomorrow, he said. See you tomorrow. He walked toward his truck. I watched him go. I didn't know if anything had actually changed, or if we were just two men accosted by the same weather, leaning in opposite directions. Maybe both. But when I got into my car, I didn't feel like a hero or a villain. I felt like a person who'd taken a break and eaten his lunch and still had his dignity in his pocket at the end of the day. Part 3 of the story didn't start with a shout or a slammed door. It started with an email subject line on Tuesday. Morning incident follow-up. I'll beyond a request to provide any observations related to stacking procedures and interpersonal conduct. It started with a conversation where respect wasn't a bullet point in a video, but a word we all had to define out loud. It started with someone finally asking Gary the question no one had bothered to ask in years. Who told you you had to be in charge of everyone's pain? And it started, weirdly enough, with a fresh pack of deodorant on the locker room bench. The kind no one made jokes about now, just a small scented reminder that sometimes the fix is simple and sometimes it isn't, and usually it's both. Asterisk, the Tuesday after the incident with the utility knife began quietly, almost suspiciously so. The hum of the fluorescent light seemed louder, the beep of the scanners sharper, as if the whole warehouse was holding its breath. HR had sent out an email late the night before. Reminder, safety protocols, stacking standards, and interpersonal respect will be monitored closely this week. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone knew what it meant. Someone had filed complaints, and someone else was on watch. By the time I clocked in, I already felt the weight of the eyes. Not just management, but coworkers too. Everyone wanted to know if I was the guy who'd stid. Everyone wanted to see how Gary would act after being mentioned in too many conversations with too many capital letters. Gary was there, of course, standing by the loading dock with his arms crossed, scanning the floor like a general surveying troops. He didn't look at me, not directly, but I felt the sideways glance as I passed. The air between us wasn't hot anymore. It was cold, brittle, like a sheet of ice stretched to thin. Morning, Maya said as she cruised by on her forklift, deliberately loud enough for Gary to hear. How's our labor law professor today? Trying not to flunk anyone, I replied. A couple of workers laughed. Gary didn't. He pulled a clipboard from the wall and started checking off boxes like his pen strokes could erase the sound of people siding with me. By mid-morning, the whispers had spread into something louder. Someone told me they saw Gary arguing with Rick near the front office. Someone else swore HR had called him in for a private meeting. The warehouse is big, enough to hold thousands of boxes but too small to hold a secret. I tried to focus on my work. Scan, lift, stack, repeat. The rhythm usually calms me, but today every beat felt like a heartbeat, every thud of a box like a question mark. My mind kept circling back to the same thought. What's his next move? It came during first break. The break room was buzzing. A dozen conversations layered over the hum of the vending machine. I was halfway through a granola bar when Gary walked in. The room dipped in volume, just a little, like the sound had been turned down one notch. He stood near the door for a moment, scanning the tables. His eyes landed on me, then slid away. Instead of sitting with his usual crew near the corner, he walked over to Jelani, the new kid. Seat taken? Gary asked, his tone casual. Shook his head nervously. Gary sat, leaning back like he owned the chair. So, he said, voice carrying enough to reach half the room. How's the new guy finding things? Getting the hang of it? Why yeah, Jelani stammered. It's good. Just trying to keep up. Gary nodded, loud enough for all to hear. Well, some people think breaks are more important than keeping up. He didn't look at me, but the words were a dart aimed in my direction. The room went quieter. Maya rolled her eyes. Luis muttered something in Spanish that I didn't catch, but I knew the tone. It was the sound of someone calling out nonsense. I let the silence sit for a second before speaking. Calm. Even labor laws aren't a suggestion. Gary, they're the reason any of us make it to retirement without falling apart. Gary's jaw tightened. Retirement, he said, his voice rising. You think this place cares about retirement? You think they'll remember your name when you're gone? No, I said. That's why I remember mine. That's why I take what I'm owed. A break isn't laziness, it's survival. The air snapped like a rubber band. Some people smirked, others just kept eating. Jelani looked like he wanted to melt into his chair. Gary didn't reply. He stood, pushed the chair back too hard, and walked out. The room exhaled. That afternoon, Rick called a floor meeting. Not the usual safety spiel, this one was sharper. Pointed. I don't care who thinks they run this place, Rick said, his voice echoing over the conveyor belts. I'm the supervisor. HR is HR. Everyone else, your employees, same as each other. You don't monitor breaks. You don't enforce rules you didn't write. You do your job. If you've got an issue, you bring it to me. Not the whiteboard, not the new kid. Me. The message was clear. He didn't say Gary's name, but he might as well have painted it. In neon, on the wall, Gary stood in the back, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the floor. For once, he didn't have a comeback. The days that followed were strange. Gary didn't quit, didn't explode. He became smaller. He still worked, still barked, the occasional order, but the swagger had drained out of him. People started talking around him, instead of through him. Jokes about deodorant turned into jokes about Gary's retirement plan, which was basically just glaring at everyone until they quit. But the biggest change was Jelani. The kid who had once looked terrified every time Gary spoke to him now started shadowing me. He asked questions, took notes, laughed at the dumb jokes I threw out to keep the day moving. And every time he got something right, I saw a little more confidence in his step. Gary noticed, of course. One afternoon, as we were stacking near the back wall, he walked past, eyes flicking between us. He didn't say a word, but the look he gave me was clear. You stole my audience. And maybe I had, but I hadn't done it out of spite. I'd done it because someone needed to show the new guy that this place wasn't just about lifting boxers. It was about standing up for yourself, about knowing the difference between authority and bullying. The real breaking point came at the end of the week. A Friday, just before click-out. The warehouse was buzzing with that unique energy of people, almost free, pallets stacked high, forklifts moving fast, everyone pushing through the last hour. I was logging my final scans when I heard the crash. A stack of boxes had toppled near the loading dock, spilling their contents across the floor. Everyone turned. Gary stood there, hands on his hips, glaring at Jelani. You stacked it wrong, Gary barked. Didn't I tell you it wasn't him? I said, walking over. I'd seen Jelani 2 aisles away, nowhere near the dock. Don't pin your mistakes on the kid. Gary's face flushed. What did you just say? You heard me. I said evenly. Own your mistakes. Don't dump them on someone else just because you can. The silence was louder than the machines. A dozen eyes on us, waiting. Gary opened his mouth, then closed it. His fists clenched. His jaw worked, but no words came. He turned, muttered something under his breath, and stormed off. For the first time, the warehouse didn't follow him with their eyes. They looked at me, at Jelani, at each other, and slowly, one by one, they went back to work. The balance had shifted. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from Jelani. Thanks for standing up for me today. I won't forget it. I smiled. My lunch had tasted better all week, but that message, that was better than any meal.